Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Delivered, where we're here to talk about building great digital products and successful companies. My name is Chris Bradshaw. I'll be your host for today's show. I'm also the product strategy director here at the wonderful world of Infinum. And today's guest, I am super excited about. Her name is Camille C. Terry. She's the CEO and co-founder of Charger Help. What do? Well, basically, they're an EV charging repair and maintenance company, but with a twist. They have an innovative approach to blending real-world data, predictive analytics, machine learning to provide industry-leading solutions, and EV charging reliability, which in the future we're all going to need. And beyond that, Camille's passion for data and technology and is combined with a commitment to community empowerment. So basically it's positioned her, I would say, as one of the thought leaders in the clean energy and mobility sectors. So super excited to get talking to Camille. Before we do, quick housekeeping, we have a Q&A box somewhere in the chat. Please leave your questions for Camille, keep them short, precise, concise. We'll get through as many as we can at the end of our conversation. And yeah, I'm just excited to get into it. So let's get into it. Let's talk about EV, sustainability. Let's go. Camille C. Terry, welcome to Delivered.
Thanks so much for having me, and good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you for joining us at an early hour where you are in the world. Also, by far one of my favorite names of guests we've had so far. Super cool name as well. So welcome to the show. And yeah, what time is it in your part of the world today?
We just got to the top of 9 o'clock, 9 a.m.
That's commitment. I love that. Well, look, I try to really summarize what you're doing, with your role, your company. And I feel like what you do is so much broader than what I can condense into such a short amount of time. I think let's talk a little bit about you first to set the scene for the audience at home about becoming a CEO and founder of Charger Help and what that kind of entails. I think let's just start with you.
Okay. Well, I'm originally from South Central Los Angeles, which is a special part of LA. My parents are immigrants, and my background, honestly, my mom worked for the school district, and my dad was actually an entrepreneur, specifically in building out server rooms across Los Angeles for a lot of the Black doctors here in LA. And so I've been around computers my whole life, had the opportunity to, delve into several sectors over the course of my career history, but really landed in the climate tech space through a company called EV Connect, where I was the 10th employee and got really fascinated and interested in really the future of mobility and how data and computers kind of play a role in that.
Yeah, I think it's such a varied area to go into because it's one of those, I guess, topics that's on the ascendancies more and more each day. And I think that kind of EV car segment of the world, like it used to be kind of this, one day I'll get one, it's probably a bit of a pipe dream, where now it's pretty normal. And I also think, that normality of maybe having an EV car comes with a cost of, can you charge it? I know lots of people that I speak to are kind of a little bit hesitant at times about, can you charge and maintain an EV car easily? I think it's more normalized now. But you're right, that whole connection point behind the car and mobility itself is the data, is the hardware, is the software working as one. So yeah, I think what you do is super cool. I'm actually quite jealous of the the role that you're in. It's a very good one with a nice ethical wrapper around it. But I mean, I guess where we are today in terms of that current state of EV and EV charging in North America, for example, where do you see that at the minute? Because I read this stat about 25% are broken at the minute. So if you have one of these EV cars, there's 25% chance when you go to charge that on a public road somewhere that you're not going to be able to do that. Where do you see that coming from your point of view?
Sure. And I'll set the stage here because you're so right. For a while, I would criticize industry and say that electric vehicles were turquoise and weird. And, not your average person was choosing to buy an electric vehicle. But I have to say, probably in the last 5 years or so, I've been impressed about what the car OEMs, specifically here in the US, done, around producing an experience that anyone would want to participate in, right? Whether you cared about the environment or not. So one, I think that's really cool. There's beautiful cars out there, an amazing experience. And one thing that folks always chat about is that it's neat to drive an electric vehicle because of the technology that you're able to introduce into that vehicle. But to your point, right, EV charging infrastructure, Man, there's so much to get into, and sometimes I get too nerdy and too into the wormhole here. So I'm gonna try to stay above waters.
You're
All right.
welcome,
So
nerds. Be nerdy as you like. Yeah, we welcome it.
yeah, so I mean, with charging infrastructure, yes, you're right. But we see about 25% of the U.S. can have, issues, and we see upwards of 90% of those issues being more software and communication issues. And I guess the last thing I'll say that probably will help to ground the conversation is that these issues are hard to detect and understand. And I think a lot of it goes back to, this being an early industry. I think that it goes to like, it's our first time ever deploying, software into the built environment in a meaningful way. And so I don't think I've ever been, taken aback by this. I think they're going to exist. I think that we're at a critical point now where it's like, okay, we understand that there are problems. What do we do next?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. And I said this maybe before on some other shows, but I feel like we have the luxury of being like at one of the most exciting times in history for
Absolutely.
humanity in terms of technology, opportunity. And I suppose as humans, we're just trying to like fundamentally work with what we have and try and normalize it as fast as we can and make it, I guess, like easy to access. And you're right, like just being able to access certain things like an EV charger, there's so much behind the scenes that actually make it work or not work right. It's not just simplistically like the plug doesn't fit or the hardware doesn't work. There's software, there's data, there's so much more, I guess, tackling that. And I suppose from that problem arises a solution. And I suppose Charger Help is that solution, which I'm very happy to see in the world. So how is that really tackling the problem then? And I tried to really blend your innovative approach in the intro because I know that crosses all manner of, I guess, nerdy sort of buzzwords, but really important ones about, analytics and artificial intelligence and things like that and machine learning. So how does Charger Help really tackle this problem with this new kind of innovative approach that I've heard about?
Sure. So I think a good way to understand kind of like how we tackle a problem is that, when I came into this industry almost about 10 years ago, I used to work for this company and I was something called EV driver support. And so essentially when EV drivers went on site and they had an experience that maybe wasn't in alignment with what they were hoping to have, they were the person that I was the person that answered their calls. But sometimes we would have these instances, and this wasn't just for the company that I was at. We were hearing this often where either the station would say that it was, available, but in actuality, it wasn't. Or the driver would describe, a behavior of the station that in the information and data set that I was privy to, I couldn't verify or validate the experience that they were having in the field. And so a good way to contextualize this is that, the Tesla is a vertically integrated system from the vehicle to the payment systems, to the connector, to the software, to the hardware. That is all one company. And so when these softwares, fail to act as intended, when there is a problem, it's a lot easier for a company to prioritize. But I'm pretty sure I think you could quote me on this. I don't believe there's any other entity that's fully vertically integrated like Tesla in the world, right? And so what ends up happening is that when there are these issues that occur, if it's a different company, if there's a different, there's different priorities. So it's hard to identify whose fault it is, where's the problem and all that jazz. So where does Charger Help come into play? For the first 2 years of the company, I really had a field service organization, right? We hired field service technicians. We worked with the Society of Automotive Engineers in order to create a standardization of what those technicians should learn and understand. And then we created a field service app. And so every time a software provider couldn't really understand what they were facing in the field, they would deploy my technicians. And so over time, we started to troubleshoot some very complex problems. And even today, sometimes Charger Help is usually the first boots on the ground of troubleshooting a problem that no one has ever seen before. But what we do differently is that we are bringing in that data set alongside data set from the charging station itself, the software itself, and then recently with an investment from a car OEM, some of that data as well. And we get a holistic viewpoint and understanding to easily then identify whose fault is it, what should be the problem, and what are the best next steps. And so we do that through a lot of data and analytics and all that jazz. But I'll pause there because I know that was a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, no, it's cool, and I can totally relate because I have an EV, And you're right, the vertical integration of Tesla is beautiful, as in like it's seamless. You don't have to think about it. You just plug it in, it works, right? It's done. But I know what it's like on the flip side when you're just trying to like plug into an, I guess you could say, a native or a different charger, and it's like I have to sign up, I have to put payment details in. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Is it available? Is it working? And I've had a couple of situations where I've almost run out of charge because I've been to a charger and wasn't working or it just didn't connect. And I think there's a level of responsibility, I guess, as this like industry is in its ascendancy, right? It's getting more people are embracing the EV cars, which is great. It's great for the world. But I think you're right. Yeah, there's so much more going on behind the scenes. And I think that's what excites me is like there is a solution here, like Charger Help, to kind of, I guess, prepare and support the ever-growing need for this, I guess, infrastructure. And as you're saying, like the infrastructure needs to grow rapidly, but in that growth comes risk. And I suppose the risk is where the opportunity lies for your company, right? Where you can go, well, we need to make sure these different types of providers have a sustainable architecture to create that kind of sustainable world long term. So I think there's like a nice beauty in the kind of like synergy of the two things coming together. And I suppose if I can really just lean on the kind of impact, I guess, around what Charger Help's bring into the industry so far, could you maybe speak to like the impact it's bringing just to, you know, the world from what you're seeing in the field?
Sure. So I think it first starts off with our business model. I believe we have one of the only business models that are directly tied, to whether the station is fully operating or not. And we just announced a performance guarantee 2 days ago where we will actually take on penalties if we're not able to enable the station to properly work. And so with that, right, it then it's a forcing mechanism on us as well that we can't solve everything by ourselves, right? Like my goal of Charger Help was never to be, oh, we're going to fix all of reliability. No, there's two things that we want to do. One is that as we get data and understanding from the field, we want to be able to bring that back to industry and tell industry, hey, we're consistently seeing an issue with being able to actually swap software over the air. That is a problem, and here's how we've identified the problem, and here's how we think that we should implement certain business standards so as an industry we can be better. Or we would say, hey, we've realized that a lot of the field service technicians do not understand open charge point protocol. This actually impedes on mean time to repair and troubleshooting an issue. We should work with the Society of Automotive Engineers in order to come up with a way in which we are going to validate that a technician not only is safe, but actually understands software protocol, right? So much of our impact is like, yes, we have, venture back, so I have to make money and all these things. Yes, we will be of service to the industry from providing a business solution. But I think, at least for me, it's more than that. It is to come to industry and say, here's some valuable insights on how we can all be successful together. And I truly believe in this idea of, rising tides lifts all boats. And at the end of the day, I can only be as great as my partners. So if my partners have the worst infrastructure, that is not good for my business model, right? And so I have to continue to feed free information back into the industry to allow for them to continue to evolve in order for the business to be successful. But to be quite honest, I wholeheartedly believe in us being able to move better. And that, as of course, you get innovation into petroleum, but that there is a better way to move with electric vehicles. It's not the silver bullet. It's not going to solve all our problems, but it absolutely is somewhat of a better way, right?
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I love how you're phrasing that in terms of like, it is a connected system, isn't it? It's not just about you and your company, it's about the partners, it's about many things all working as one to make this work seamlessly, I guess, for the kind of just general populace who use this technology going forward. And I was actually quite interested about, in my notes here, I was going to ask you a bit about the kind of legislation in the US about EV charging, because I think in this spirit of everything working together as one, is there something there around like legislation in the US that maybe needs to tie into this to help produce a better architecture and better infrastructure for EV charging in general? Is this something that maybe that you guys have maybe been part of or assisted with in any way?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that our industry struggled with early on was that we didn't really have an agreed upon way to measure reliability or to measure how the product was being used in the once it was deployed. And so we actually worked with this guy named Corey Bullis out of Flow. And he's actually the one that first came to us, was like, hey, like, we want to create a formula. And for a long time, I had been really trying to advocate for us to, at least at bare minimum, you know, make an agreement that all of our formulas weren't the right ones, right? And so Corey comes and he's like, with Flow, and they're like, look, we have this rendition of a formula. Can we start bringing in industry in order to collaborate to all agree that this is a formula that we could put forward? And so that formula actually got picked up by the federal, the U.S. federal administration through the NEVI legislation, but most we were able to put forth the legislation in California called the EV Charging Reliability Act. And that specific legislation was more so to really nudge the Energy Commission to measure, right? Because you can't really fix what you haven't measured, to measure uptime and reliability, and then to be able to put forth some type of teeth behind folks not, hitting a certain metric. So absolutely, we were part of those conversations, brought the folks together, but definitely want to honor that, the industry really took it seriously, and really put some time behind getting the legislation stood up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good and powerful way to look at what it takes to, I guess, run a company as much as be a face of a company. It is about building great products. It is about building something that's useful to the world, but having almost like you have a kind of responsibility or the power to maybe make real change in a positive way beyond just the bottom line, which I know companies need to make because everyone's backed by venture or they have P&Ls to maintain. But I think if you can be part of the change around that legislation, and I think also I'm quite interested as well, you mentioned before about what a technician needs to do now to maintain this stuff. It's not just a hardware technician now, it's also software. I mean, maybe there's something within that as well around the kind of wages, the quality of technicians being paid fairly for the work they do, because it must be pretty skilled and pretty hard going at times as well. Have you been involved in anything around that as well as the legislation?
Sure. And I mean, just to double tap on the point you were making earlier, it's fascinating as a CEO, you kind of have to find these sweet spots where you can do good, you can make profit, and you can do something that lasts. And not every instance, and I don't think not every business is able to find a sweet spot, but we've been very, privileged and blessed to find these sweet spots where we can continue to drive the business, we can bring in partners, and then we can also have, significant impact. And so with the technicians as well, one of the things that we consistently faced was that a lot of folks didn't understand systems. So you had, electricians that were going out to solve software issues, but didn't really understand the system of a charging station from a software perspective. And most of the time, look, the electricity was fine, right? We were facing interoperability issues. And so, I can't even take any credit for this. My co-founder, who worked for the Department of Labor, and really understood what it took to actually establish a job code in the United States, really took ownership of, bringing industry together as well to be able to say, what do we agree on that this person should know? And then it was, what we wanted to insert was, then what should they be paid, right? And I'll say two things really quickly why this was important to us. One, in the US, we wanted to make sure that whether you had a college degree or not, this position was a minimum of a high school diploma, and that the base pay, minimum pay was $31 an hour. And that's a good starting rate for, folks in the US if, with a high school diploma. The other thing that we wanted to do was that there was a good coupling of technology and people. So what I was chatting about earlier, it's very important to showcase that charging reliability is not a labor problem, right? You can send a technician out on day. That does not mean that you will solve the issue. You have to get data and insights from the field, and the goal is to eventually solve it from over the air. But here's the thing: it is not to replace the job of the technician. It is to protect the job of the technician. Because what ends up happening is, if you can solve more things over the air that are more rudimentary, right? And in that way, you continue to allow for this technician to become a specialized workforce, because then they are only concerned with harder problems. And that was really important to us, is that as we solved more rudimentary things over the air and got data insight, we continue to allow for this technician to become more specialized. So they could never become a job that you would pay $12 an hour, $15 an hour. We're always utilizing technology in order to plump up that technician to ensure that they're working on the hardest problems.
I love that. Yeah. And it's very much, I guess, what you just articulated is like the antithesis of things like data, machine learning, AI. Like, there's this big narrative that it's there to take people's jobs and, automate them away. But actually, you're right. Like, it's actually about augmenting the human to be more specialist and to leverage the technology and to utilize the data and to deploy stuff faster, better. And essentially, they are still there in job, and they're still, as the technology is getting more complex, they're getting more tooled up with this stuff. And I think that's really where I see a lot of shifts, whether we're talking about EV charging or, autonomous companies or anything to do with AI, to do with EV. It's the same method about empowering the humans to deliver that better service. And like you're saying, make it more specialist and not generic. So yeah, it's great to hear that's the kind of the vibe, I guess you could say, from a technician's point of view. And
I guess the only thing I would add to that is, like, I think you have to be very intentional about it, because I definitely do think that there's a lot of people that aren't thinking about people when they're thinking about technology. So I do want to point out, because it's not easy, right? It's not like, oh, we created the software now that we're going to protect technicians' jobs. So we are constantly having to figure out how to protect technicians' jobs. So I do want to overlay that not everyone is doing that. Some people are trying to replace people. And two, there is a level of critical thought that has to go into this to ensure that it works properly. So I just want to call that out.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think from doing innovation from my side, from I don't even know, 20 years now, a long time, it definitely needs to have the human component, the people component fully considered. Otherwise, that, I think, is the kind of single point of failure most of the time for any software innovation-based product, service. You have to have that in. But definitely pro-human, definitely about augmentation versus replacement, at least from my point of view. So that's good to hear. I mean, in terms of Charge helps accelerating the adoption of EVs, from improving a driver experience, why, from your point of view, is the mass adoption of EVs important to you personally? Do you have a connection to it beyond the business and beyond shareholders and venture P&Ls you have to satisfy? Where does it sit for you from a personal point of view?
Sure. So, I mean, I think the thing that was so interesting to me when I came into this space was realizing just how much air quality impacted my life. And I didn't really understand or realize that, being in South Central, I'm amongst freeways. And so, most of the folks in my family have asthma. My mom passed away from cancer. My co-founder, who's from Compton, who's really surrounded by freeways, both of her parents passed away from lung-related diseases. And so I always tell folks, look, no, there's a lot that needs to be improved when it comes to the EV batteries and electric vehicles, but is there an opportunity to innovate in order to be better? Yes. And so we deserve we deserve to engage in that and try to be better, right? And that's why so I always think about EVs and just trying to be more innovative as not just a nice to have, but personally, it's it's a health issue. It's crazy. We breathe air that harms us all the time. That's wild to me. So I'm trying to do my part to circumvent that a bit.
Yeah, I love actually when you boil it down to first principles. It's we produce lots of air or toxic air from ICE vehicles, and that harms us. So you want to fix it, and that's totally
Do
you know what I mean? It doesn't get more simple than that. And you're right. And I also, from an early adopter of an EV myself, and you get the skeptics saying, well, they might be doing this, but then they're doing bad somewhere else by how they produce the batteries and stuff. But in my mind, it's what you just said, really. It's better to start than make it perfect. And I think, yes, It isn't perfect now, but it is a start to change longer term. That yourself and your companion are alike. That's going to get more improved, more better, more accessible over time. So, yeah, very commendable. today.
Thank you.
And I guess just want to touch on the challenges because there must be some that have come to pass from your side, and how, what's that really been like? What have you learned from that as a personal experience? But, I guess it's also been the same for like in the computing industries, telecom industry, challenge like preventing innovation from flourishing. So
Mm.
yeah, what have you kind of like what stories have you got from it? Because nothing's always sunshine and rainbows. There's always a dark cavern to cross to get to where you are. And what's
Yeah.
that challenge been for you?
You know what? I think because I have a bit of a different perspective. Look, I come from a community um, that the challenges that we face in life are not things that are not huge. Like it's so funny. Like when you start thinking about like some of the things that I've seen or some of the things that like folks in my community have experienced, and like nothing ever seems like super
Mm,
horrible to us. It's kind of like, well, that's just like how we grew up. Like you don't know anything different. And so I think that's been very
right.
helpful, like as a founder in innovation, because like I think I approach life where it's like, no, it's gonna be like hard things are not bad things. And if something is
Mm,
hard, doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. I almost there's an expectation that things should not come super easily. And so I guess for
mm,
me, I just have to consistently remind myself of like I would say three things. One is that so much of what innovation is like people having an understanding, and so always trying to find to people and trying to understand like if they're pushing back or if they don't get something, why, right? Like what is their perspective? And so that's very helpful to me. And I think the other part is that there is so much power in like people. I believe that people are inherently good, and that there's power in like tapping into your community and trying to figure out how to
mm,
solve something. And I think the last piece, this is really what my dad instilled in me. Like, there's nothing that I cannot do. And if I wanted to go to the moon tomorrow, and I know it would take a long time, and maybe I couldn't go tomorrow, but I could figure it out. And so,
yeah,
with those
yeah.
kind of principles, there's nothing that I would say, oh, this is so hard, or this has been a tough thing. It's like, no, it's all supposed to be a little hard. If it was easy, then I would be worried.
Yeah, that's so true. Because, I think the reality is like the best things in life are on the other side of difficulty, right? And hardship. So it's like if there isn't that friction to get past something, like you say, it probably isn't either big enough or right enough for you to work on that problem. And I love like a founder story that is steeped in conviction, like what you're saying there. It's like it's not just about building a company to build it, sell it, make money, which is the most standard basic answer of all times. It's actually to help a real problem that's affected the real people around in your life, and you're just there to try and do good things with this vehicle, right? And that's what I think a business is. It's a vehicle to do good things. And yes, it makes money, and yes, it does other stuff, but it is ultimately, or it should be anyway, just probably my optimistic view on business. But if it can do good with that beyond making great like products and services and some money, what a great thing to be in. It's a great way to work. And I suppose just on that, I'd be really curious just to like talk a bit about, I guess, the long-term vision. I think I have a sense of, but maybe we can just maybe talk a little bit like how you see the kind of like short-term, long-term vision there. And I know we danced around it a little bit just in the previous
Yeah.
kind of like points, but just to maybe cement that for the audience at home.
Yeah, I mean, like my super long term vision is really around solving this problem of like what happens when you bring software into the built environment? What happens when you have multiple protocols that have to interact with one another, and you can't fix everything yet over the air because we've never brought software into the built environment, right? And what is the workforce of the future when things are all connected through software and there's a physical aspect to it, right? And so, yeah, I
Mm,
mean, the most immediate goal of Charger Help is that we want to be able to offer essentially an insurance like product on all of these charging assets, the full system. And I want to be able to utilize data in order to offer a guarantee on the performance of those assets. And if they don't perform, I want to be able to, offer that we would have some type of penalties against it. So because I think like that's the type of product that when you think about electrifying, the California Highway Patrol cars, or you think about electrifying, FedEx, vehicles, or the vehicles that deliver stuff from a lot of these large companies. It's not going
Yeah.
to be good enough to have a parts warranty. It's not going to be good enough that you sold some type of service level agreement. People are going to want to say like, hey, because if my medium or heavy duty truck cannot deliver this shipment because you, software
Yeah.
provider, can't figure out what's wrong with your software, there's a problem here. And so, Charger Hope just wants to be able to deliver a level of trust and certainty to the industry, so that way
Mm.
people can continue to run their businesses in a better way through, electrification, but they're not having to necessarily take any type of the pain that comes with having software in the built environment.
Yeah, I love that answer in terms of connecting it back to just everyday important ecosystems, like you say, to change, I guess, the day-to-day driver like me to an EV is one thing, but to maybe move that into higher, more, I guess, larger vehicles like lorries and even emergency vehicles like ambulances and things like that.
Absolutely.
You don't want, like, say, you can't afford the EV problem, like the charger doesn't work. I
No.
can't move it, you know? And I've never thought about it that scale, but you're right. That would be the most systemic change of at all time, right? To make a dent in this kind of pollution problem from mobility vehicles, right? And so, yeah, it sort of like just clicked to me like why this is so important now, beyond just in my mind, I was like, oh, it's to help people like me who have a car that's an EV and it just stops it from, not being able to charge it. But when you look at that level, the infrastructure level of like larger vehicles, it's so super important. And I think that's
Oh.
a really, yeah, exciting thing beyond the other sustainable parts of this. Um, yeah. So I'm going to move on because I could go on this a lot longer, but I know we have limited time. Can we talk a little bit about you and your leadership style? And I know this is kind of a bit of a jump from the world to more to you, but what kind of culture do you build at Charger Help, to foster that innovation? And again, because we talked about it before, right? Like the people are a big part of the innovation. It's not just the technology. You need that culture as well in there, working as one. So yeah, let's talk about leadership style. What's your vibe with leadership style?
Yeah, I think I would say the thing I would point out about my leadership style is like I'm really, really aware of all the things that I don't know how to do well, and I try to find people that can fill in that gap. So
I
like
love that. Yeah.
yeah, like for me, I'm a visionary. I have purpose. I know what I want to build, and I know that I
Mm,
want to build it with in kindness, but I also drive very hard. And so I have to have a balance, because like
mm.
everyone is not all purpose built like me, or like look, some people work for the company, it's just a job, right? And so I have to, be careful of my expectations. And so my co-founder, Yvette Ellis, she's so good at being able to kind of just make sure that as I drive and go, that the people at the company are well taken care of, right? And the same thing, Walter Thorne leads our SVP of product and strategy, and he also
Mm.
sits in this tandem of understanding like the vision and then also the reality of today. And so yeah, I think my leadership style is just being hyper aware of what I'm not good at and trying to make sure that that doesn't harm people. Because sometimes, the things that you're not good at, it could be very harmful to others, right? And so trying to be
Yeah.
aware of that. And then I just try to really listen, man. Like, I mean, I'm constantly just trying to like get information in to know when I'm like screwing up or not doing great, but also being aware of the things I'm really good at. So it's like, in college, my degree was in organizational leadership, and so I took a lot of leadership classes. And the thing about leading, I feel like you're constantly, at least you're constantly trying to figure out like, okay, am I still a good leader? Am I still a good leader? It's like a daily check-in, and you'll
Yeah.
mess up. You mess up all the time. I might like mess up once a day. I'm just like, damn it, I shouldn't have done that. So it's self-awareness, and then
Yeah.
getting people that can like protect your pointy parts, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to build something very fast, and something that's
Mm.
never been done before, and it is extremely hard. And there's 41 people that work at Charger Help that, of course, yeah, they're excited about what we're building, but at the end of the day, they all have families. And
Yeah.
so it's an intricate balance. So
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that is an answer, but those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I think you've nailed it nicely, and I think you're right. It's about acknowledging what you are as much as you are not, right? And I think embracing that and filling the gaps to counterbalance the things you're not, right? And that then protects your team, your business. It's a very hard thing to do as well, because I think there's probably a slight level of like, yeah, you have to check in with yourself, right? And check your ego and be like, okay, I'm not great at this thing, so I need to solve that now because it's ripple effects through. This is purely from like an experience that I've been through historically. Like I know it's a difficult, it's just like a spiritual thing, isn't it? It's quite a spiritual
Oh,
question, that wasn't
absolutely.
it? In hindsight.
Yeah.
So I guess I could say like a lot of people that watch this show, they're obviously tech related people. They maybe are in a large company or enterprise, or even starting their own companies or have started their own companies. Obviously, from your background, what advice would you give to a tech startup founder? And it can be
Mm.
spiritual and non-spiritual.
Yeah. You know what? It's so funny. This morning, I do this like little ritual thing. This is the first time I like recorded it, but I was gonna put it on Instagram and I put it and I took it down. But so every morning, because the biggest advice I would give to a founder is that it is so important to protect your mental space. Um, because I think in building and creating, sometimes you might be 3 or 4 light years ahead of like what reality is today, and some of that you do have to bring back to reality because you got to build something today. But then some of that, you have to protect from people from squashing it. And so I always
Yeah.
tell folks, like building and creating it to me is like the greatest part about being a human and living is to like have purpose and then to create something
Mm.
from nothing. Like that is so incredible to me. But in order to do that, grounding yourself. So every morning, and I'm not like some people, they're like, oh, I meditate for 30 minutes. I could never. I wish I could. Well, I guess I should never say never, but it would be difficult, huh? So I do 5 minutes of meditation, and sometimes I just do one breath. But every morning,
Yeah.
I just try to start off with like 5 minute meditation. I've been doing really good at writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for, and you would just be so surprised on some of your worst days, you can still find 3 things that you're grateful for. And then I've been reading the Stoics. So I've been reading the Stoics, and I've also been reading the Bible. I picked back up the Bible. I went to a Christian college, and I picked back up the Bible. So
Wow.
I've been doing the Stoics and then the Bible, and then I try to
Yeah.
read some type of like book. But
Oh man,
I
going
just tell
deep.
people you got to try to ground yourself. Yeah.
I love that. So I'm assuming you've read like the Ryan Holiday type stuff, right? Around his
Yes.
Stoics stuff, Ego's the Enemy, all that stuff. I'd highly recommend that
Yes.
book to anyone listening. Ego's the Enemy, amazing book, especially if you're building companies. Yeah, keeps you in check.
Yes, sir.
We love that. I love that. I suppose to kind of wind down my questions, we have quite a few from the audience listening. Just in terms of the best thing you've delivered, had to get that in there somewhere. What's the best thing you feel you've delivered? And that could be from a career, your company, or even your personal life. What is there a thing that stands out as like, yeah, I'm pretty proud of delivering that.
Man, I'm so proud of Charger Health. Like
Mm,
I think that this is the best thing I could have ever really invested in. And when I think back to like all of the experiences that I have, it's like it's a culmination. Like I don't
mm.
have any children. My dad always asked me about grandchildren. I was like, look, you got a whole toddler. Charger Health, 5 years old. This is my prized possession. So, I think that Charger Hope has done an incredible thing for the industry of bringing forth and highlighting a problem
Ooh.
that didn't exist. I think that we've really showcased what collaboration can bring. And then most of the people, I would say about 90% of the people at Charger Hope never worked at an EV charging company before. And so for them to
Mm.
now be exposed to this space and people pick off my people all the time, which I think is fine. You pay them more, you could take them. That's fine. Um,
Yeah.
and so, and I guess like the last thing I'll say is like what I'm most excited about is what are the startups that are going to come from Charger Hope. I think that's what would make my heart feel so warm is to see like who at the company has saw another gap and that they'll go out and solve it. And I'm really excited for that to see that. But today I would say that this is the thing that I'm the most proud of that I've ever built in my whole life.
Yeah. I love that. I love that because it's such a part of you as well, isn't it? I suppose you put your whole self into this. So
Yeah.
it's I think it's a reciprocal thing. If you're proud of what you've done and you're proud of it, I mean, it's a great thing to have delivered. I feel quite proud about it, and I've always really discovered it really from us talking, but like what it represents. So, you know, okay. Look, so I'm gonna sort of move across me to sort of like some questions from our audience, and we'll go from there. If that's okay with you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's move to questions. And I'm going to pick the first one here that's come up. And this one is we mentioned being nerdy and technical, right? So this might be one of those questions. I don't really fully understand this, but you might do. So this is from
Okay.
Lovero. So what are the percentages of OCPP 2.0 that you're seeing in the field? Are you seeing any advances in reliability in relation to 1.6? That means nothing to me, but it sounds pretty
Yeah,
technical.
man. Okay, look, because I was telling someone the other day, I was like, I don't think there's any deployed OCPP 2.0 in deploy. I haven't come across it. And then someone told me, no, there is. I said, okay. 1.6, and look, I am a huge fan of Open Protocol, huge fan of the Open Charge Alliance. I think that 1.6 had a lot of holes. What we're continue to hear is that 2.0 is kind of going to be the saving grace of everything. I know that everybody's been releasing that they're 2.0 certified, but I personally have not encountered a station that is on 2.0 yet. So if they're out there, please let me know. I will go. I would love to experience a deployed in the ground today 2.0 station. But as of today, everything that we're working on is 1.6J, and I think we have recently come across a 1.5, which is crazy. So, but look, I'm actually going to be in Europe in 2 weeks, and I'll be at the Open Charge Alliance, and just really trying to dig into just making sure that some of the things that we're seeing in 1.6, as people implement 2.0, that they'll take care of it. But there's more reliability problems around business standards, I would say, than, I mean, implementation is a problem too, but yeah, I guess I'll leave that there. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but yes.
I can imagine. I can see. There's almost a challenge there. Maybe for Love Ro, maybe you can find a 2.0 to just share out into
Yes.
the world when you're in Europe. As a challenge back to Love Ro from the question. Thanks, Love Ro, for that question. Okay, so the next question is actually less technical. And what's been your most difficult challenge when running a venture-backed startup? Which I know of how this can
Oh
be.
man.
So, but yeah, please share your insights on
I was
that.
just telling my co-founder, like, why do we take this money? Running venture, yeah, I mean, look, yeah. I don't even know where to start. It's all very difficult. It's all very hard. I think that you end up with a lot of investors that have never run companies themselves. Everybody has opinions about what you shouldn't do. And look, sometimes they're good opinions. Sometimes it's noisy. It becomes very noisy. I feel like that's the biggest like hang up with running a venture backed company is that it's very noisy. And the thing is, like, for a long time I would think like, oh well, these people must know better than me because they see all these companies. And then you start talking to investors that have opposing viewpoints. And so then you're just like, so there's not a way. Okay. And so I would just say that running a venture backed startup is just so noisy, and everybody has an opinion about how you should run your company. But none of them, most of the time, have ever run a company. So there is that. But the good part about it, because I'll balance it with the good part, you do find those investors that you trust, that do more listening than talking, that do more trying to help you to seek clarity as a founder than trying to tell you what to do. And those investors you cherish and you hold close to you. And I do have a few of those, but I have a lot of people that like to tell me how to do my job.
Almost need more, almost a bit like Yoda or something like that. Someone that's more like a mythical sage to
You
guide
just
you
turn
rather
down the
than.
volume on them. It's like, oh,
Yeah, I can't hear you, but thank you there. Okay, okay, yeah, interesting. I mean, it's not the first time I've heard that, but yeah, it's good to see it's consistent anywhere in the world, at any industry, right? It's the vibe.
yeah.
Um, okay, so I've got one more here actually. Let's look. What is Charger Help's strategy to combat OEMs providing long-term warranties on new charging stations?
Yeah, it's the issue that we see a lot of time with the hardware. Well, one, we're getting our strategy has been a lot of the OEMs are reselling, starting to resell our product. So that's like one way to do it. The other thing is that we find that most of and you're talking about charging hardware OEMs, most of them are selling parts only warranty, which doesn't account for if you have a comms issue, a software issue, an interoperability issue. Most folks don't want to touch it because they don't have the data set to be able to prove that they'll be successful. And so most of if you're not getting any type of reliability stuff that's a full wraparound, you're going to get stuck with them saying this isn't covered underneath our warranty, which is what we see today, right? Like, well, you can't really prove that it's a hardware issue, or you can't really prove that it's our software. And so we haven't really seen, I mean, there's one company, Relion, that's in Canada. I know they offer like a reliability as a service, and I think there's a what's up, something to that effect. But look, at the end of the day, competition only makes us better, and that's why I tell my engineers and my team is like, I love a good competition. Like, let's go. Like, okay, let's do it. It's only gonna make us better.
Fair. Love that attitude. That's great. Okay, look, we'll do one more question. That's okay. And then, yeah, and just bring it right back to what I kind of said at the start in the intro, right? We talked a lot about, you blend real-time data, predictive analytics, AI, etc. So we have a question here actually that's come in. How does technology like AI, predictive analytics help improve charger reliability and customer satisfaction in terms of maintenance?
Yeah. Look, it's all one thing I'll say is that you have so many companies that are coming out now that are like, oh, we do AI, machine learning for maintenance. And it bothers me so much because a lot of them, one, have never done O&M, period. And then two,
Yeah.
most of them are pulling data off of they're just pulling straight OCPP data. And we produced a report called the EV Charging Reliability Report where we proved that data set is oftentimes wrong, right? And so they're making predictions and ML and models off of bad data sets, and it's frustrating because you set the customer up for failure because you don't really understand what you're doing, right? What we believe is that bringing in field service data, bringing in O&M, bringing in all the troubleshooting things, right? You could build out a very large LLM. Like for us, last April, we hit 19 million unique data points from all field service data, right? And that was just last April. We just opened up, we have a field service app that we now have field service partners like OWL and SPACO that are going to start working on it. So we'll get even more data from the field and more learnings from the field. And then so what I focus on, instead of having all this fancy terminology of AI and ML and all of that, we focused on the raw data set first and understanding that data set first. Now I'm starting to build, machine learning models on top of that. And I'm not even calling it AI yet because I don't think we have enough data set and enough learnings for us to even say that, right? No, I have a big data set. I'm doing some analysis. I'm doing some L on it. But the thing that you'll realize, and this is why I'm okay with competing, is that people will talk all this fancy talk, but then no one looks underneath the curtain and be like, well, what data set are you doing this fancy stuff off of? Because if you have bad data in, bad data out. And so that's what we've been focused on, and against the how you call it, like recommendations of my investors. They're like, you should just say you do AI. I'm like, no, I'm smart enough to know that I'm not doing AI. I'm doing very fancy, complex analysis, but we're not there yet. But when I get there, oh, you better know that it's going to be something incredible.
Now, off the right foundations and the right data
Oh
sets, and
yeah,
I think you're right. It's something that people don't necessarily look at because it's not as sexy as like this kind of like AI
it's not
revolution, but
sexy
without
at all.
not
It's
at
very
all.
hard.
But without the right data, you're going to be producing a very, I guess, long-term unsexy AI product that'll basically produce crap, basically.
Exactly.
So, okay, so look, okay, I say one more question. This is the one more question, and then we'll start to wrap because we've got so many coming through. But this is from Pranesh, and in the absence of actual real-time data of public chargers that are down, is there a rule of thumb that would provide a ballpark of chargers that are down, say, in California?
Wait, one more time.
Yeah, in the absence of actual real-time data of public chargers being down, okay, is there a rule of thumb that will provide
Ooh.
a ballpark of chargers that are down? I kind of understand.
Yeah, I guess I mean, the thing is that we have, so interestingly enough, like California, they're requiring that you start pushing out real time data. So the issue is not The issue is not that we don't have access to real time data, because we have a system, we could pull in real time data now. I think what we're looking at is like, how do you validate that data set? And so how we've done it is like, you can it's the coolest thing, and I think it's Foundry or Scondry or something like that. They showcase a lot of the patterns that they see as well, and they're looking at a broader system. But yeah, you can build models off of how a product has reacted when it wasn't working. And then when you bring in, you actually we have access to real time data. You bring in the real time data, and then you find those patterns, right? And you say, oh, okay, this probably is down. This probably isn't working. So I think it's all about it's really about those service data and information and other data sets than just real time data, because we don't have a lack of real time data. If I understood that question right. If not, you can link in me, and then I will further
Yeah,
explain if needed. Yeah.
look at that. In some respects, that's almost the perfect segue to my kind of final wrap up question, I guess, really, which is around where can the good people watching this and maybe watch this later, where can they find stuff about yourself, the good work at Charger Help? What's your best location?
Yeah, the best place is, yeah, I say on the LinkedIn, like on LinkedIn.
Uh,
On LinkedIn, meet me on the LinkedIn. I try to like post, things that I learn. I get very passionate. I have a marketing. People always think, like, oh, your marketing team does your personal LinkedIn. I was like, no, it's just something that will really impassion me, and I'm like, let me go talk about it on LinkedIn.
yeah,
So
love that.
that's probably the best place if you follow me personally on the LinkedIn. If you want well crafted, great marketing, follow Charger Help. If you want my random sporadic thoughts, you can follow me.
Love that. Super honest. But look, thank you for this, yeah, sharing this with us today and answering the questions and just really, yeah, there's certainly some light bulb moments that came to mind just talking to you about the importance of the work you're doing. And yeah, I thank you for doing it. I think it is an important company to see around the world. And I'm glad you're coming to Europe to spread the good word. And all I'll say is thank you for the time and safe travels on your European tour in the next few weeks.
Thank you.
Well, a huge thank you once again to Camille for coming on the show, sharing her knowledge, sharing the vision, and all the good stuff that she's working on. Also, thanks to each and every one of you for coming on, all your questions, your participation, your time joining the discussion today. Big thanks from that. And just a final thing for me, really, is if you need, of course, a technology partner to help with anything around not just mobility or EV, but generally digital products, reach out to us at infinum.com. We'll happily help figure out a thing for you, what you can do, how we can help you build digital products or any kind of innovation. We'd just love to help. And I guess lastly, if you want to see anything more on Delivered, go to infinum.com/delivered, where you can sign up to our newsletter, see any previous shows, or look at our next upcoming show as well. And with that being said, that's been Delivered. I've been Chris Bradshaw. Thanks for your time today, and I wish you all a beautiful rest of your week. Goodbye.